Hi everyone, this is Erica Calabernal Maresha, the first reporter of Group 4. And today, we will going to discuss one of the most interesting topic of health education handled by Miss Remy. And why is it one of the most interested topic? Because this will relate to all of us. Why? Just wait and you will find out. So first, I will going to introduce first our what you call this members. So the group members are Jamila Natangkob, Dimple Neri, Laika Nazareno, Rhoda Maybano, and the next are me, yours truly, Erica Cala Mauresio, Famea Auxilio, Lordilin Baha, and Mr. JC Emmanuel Leopardas. So, the next are Zoila Ken Magtana, Ronaldin Manlasang, and Ana Marwell Pabilar. So, shout out to all of you guys. And before we start from our reporting, we will first what you call this show or let you watch a video about our topic. So our topic will cover the intellectual disability and Asperger syndrome. So what are those? So please watch out, stand by and listen so that we will learn about this topic. So the video will start now.
This module provides a brief summary of what an intellectual disability is. An intellectual disability is a disability characterized by significant limitations in both intellectual functioning and in adaptive behavior, which covers many everyday social and practical skills. This disability originates before the age of 18. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates that approximately 3% or 6.5 million of civilian, non-institutionalized adults had ID in 2010. Intellectual functioning, also called intelligence, refers to general mental capacity, such as learning, reasoning, problem-solving, and so on. It coexists with strengths. One way to measure intellectual functioning is an IQ test. Generally, an IQ test score of around 70 or as high as 75 indicates a limitation in intellectual functioning. Adaptive behavior is the collection of conceptual, social, and practical skills that are learned and performed by people in their everyday lives. Conceptual skills include language and literacy, money, time, and number concepts, and self-direction. Social skills include interpersonal skills, social responsibility, self-esteem, gullibility, naivete, social problem-solving, and the ability to follow rules and obey laws, and to avoid being victimized. Practical skills include activities of daily living or personal care, occupational skills, health care, travel and transportation, schedules and routines, safety, use of money, use of the telephone. Standardized tests can also determine limitations in adaptive behavior. People with intellectual disabilities are your neighbors, co-workers, or fellow students, friends, and family members. Changes in policy over the last decades has meant that the overwhelming majority of people with intellectual disabilities live in the community, on their own, with their families or friends. What is important to them is what is important to everyone, living a healthy and meaningful community life.
So I know that you finished watching our video. I hope our classmate will what you call this insert the video. So as you can see, our topic is all about intellectual disability. So ano ko ganina no? Sabi ko kanina na ang topic namin is all about I will interest or will relate to all of us. Why? Because intellectual disability is a common developmental disability. Why? It is not noticeable, but a lot of people are clinically diagnosed with this. Dili siya kanang dali na to makita, but daghay tao, especially sa US, there are 6.5 million na what you call this, clinically diagnosed individual with intellectual disability only sa US. So how much more diri sa Philippines, 'di ba? So grabe ni siya ka-relatable kay dili lang kita, 'di ba, ta kabalo basig kita ang naay ingon ani na disability. Pwede ang atong igsuon, pwede atong workmates, pwede atong best friends, or pwede atong uyab kung daghan kay uyab. So yeah, so mo na siya makarelate ta ani no kay pwede as a nurse in the future we will encounter a lot of people with this disability, and we will and we need to what you call this, learn about this so that maka adjust ta and kabalo ta kung unsaon nato pag communicate and interact sa ilaha. So yeah. So this condition originates before the age of 18. And this will what you call this will maigoan yang atong, or the symptoms are impaired reasoning, impaired learning, and problem solving, and adaptive behavior. So sana to makabalo nga we are we have this intellectual disability. So kung magpa-diagnose ta or magpa-check up ta, we will know that we have intellectual disability when we got a 75 score on IQ test. So there are a lot of IQ tests on the internet, no, pero I don't think na ngan ana siya ka what you call this, magsaligid ta ana ang score, but then itry lang nato, no? So there is no I think walay mali ana. So this will so conceptual, practical, and social skill will also affect sa ingon ani nga disability. So did you know nga si Albert Einstein kay siya ang pinakataas nga nakakuha og IQ test? Kabalo ba mo ana? Pero naani siya na-appeal na sa club for what you call this, genius people. So kinsa si Albert Einstein nakakuha og 160 score sa IQ test, and then this 12-year-old English schoolboy has 162 score sa IQ test. So ang 160 score no ni Einstein is for 18 below lang na siya. Pwede na siya pinakataas na for 18 below. But this kid got the 162 score, which is higher than Einstein. So this guy is Barnaby Swinburne, IQ 162. So now, let us proceed to the most causes of this intellectual disability. So several syndromes are factors that affects developing neurologic, what you call this, system, factors that negativity affect the newborn, and result of social factor. So the result of social factor is, first things first, is lack of education. Lack of education will lead us to intellectual disability. So wait. So why is that, no? Pananaw ninyo nga, no? So I think para sa ako, no, maka-cause jud siya og intellectual disability kay wala niya gi what you call this, wala niya gi hasa og maayo ang atong learning and all, and you know dili ta maingon ana ka what you call this, dili ta maingon ana ka grabe og think kay when kung mag-study ta, di ba, mahasa gyud ang ato ang panghuna-huna, and then grabe na nato ka stress kay nag-work ang ato ang minds and all. So since intellectual disabilities has multiple causes, the first major characteristic of several syndromes such as Down syndrome, Fragile X syndromes, and fetal alcohol syndrome. So the second one is, di ba, katong any factor that affects the developing neurologic system of fetus, like for example drugs, disease, and trauma. So nga nung apil man jud ang drugs, no, kay like mo na dyan, no, nga ang parents kinahanglan jud nila, or ang mama nato, no, ang pregnant moms kinahanglan jud nila consult first sa ilahang doctor kung okay ba ni siya nga tambal, okay ba ni siya na product, healthy ba ni siya nga product for the baby, cause everything na gina-take sa ato ang mama kay mo diretso gyud na siya sa baby, and mas maapektuhan ang baby kaysa sa lawas sa mga mom shibels. So yeah. So the third one, which is the so the third one, which is the social factors such as lack of education and lack of stimulation from adults not being responsive to infants and young children. So one of this is birth trauma, low birth weight, disease, and any other factors that negatively affect the newborn. So apil na di ay na siya dira. So apil na pod ang sa ika-third, apil na pod dira ang what you call this, trauma and all, and then ang pagiging what you call this, dili pagka-responsive sa ato ang parents, like pasagdan lang ka nga wala kay ma-learn, ang ana dili ka tudloan, dili ka ingnon. Di ba pag bata pa, hilig na sila mangutana, pero ang uban nga parents dili na sila ginapansin. But dapat di ay inyoha siyang pag mangutana sa inyo perme, inyohang babies or inyohang mga anak nga bata pa, no, bisag dako na hilig na sila mangutana because they are trying to learn, no. So dapat inyohan na silang tubagon og tarong and tama, kay mo na siya makahasa sa ilahang mind, which will help them na ma-avoid ang intellectual disability. So nga naman nato ni siya kinahanglan nga tunan ang intellectual disability. Why? Because like what I've said, no, sa first slide na, this is a common what you call this, disability. So nurses like us, nurses like us. So nurses, like a lot of nurses, so bisa kita in the future maka-encounter yung taog adult and young individual with, you know, intellectual disability, because intellectual disability has a variance of setting and circumstances. So pag nanatay ka ato ba nga with ingon ani nga disability, no, nakita mo sa picture na nasa mo slide na ay bata pa and nanay taggo na. So as nurses, di gyud nato ni mapugnan nga maka-encounter tag ingon ani na mga people. So dili pod kung maka-encounter tag ingon ani na mga tao, dili nato sila dili ta mag-stereotype. So stop na to, na mo gyud na ang pinaka dapat natong stop, like ingon pa ni Miss Remy nga dili gyud ta mag-stereotype and ato gyud na siyang pungan. Why? Especially an intellectual disability. Like what I've said, intellectual disability has a variance of settings and circumstances. So dili nato siya i-base ang isa ka tawo nga na intellectual disability. Kung makabalta silang edad, dili na to i-base ang ilahang understanding sa kung unsa na ilang edad. Why? Because there are people na intellectual disability, pero ang ilahang pangsabot, ang ilahang act kay pang bata pa or pang 7 years old. Bisag 18 years old na siya, pero kay ang iyang panghuna-huna, ang iyang pagsabot, ang iyang act kay pang 7 years old. So that is why kinahanglan nato ni sabton, kinahanglan nato mahibalan ang nature ani, cause dili tanan na ay intellectual disability, mild man or grabe, dili ingon ana kapareha ang ilahang pangsabot, ang ilahang pangstorya ug ang ilahang pamatasan. That is why health education is very important, and I can tell that this is very relatable to all of us, because kisa man diri ang walay kailangan, you know, kung sa ato pang word, no, as a special what you call this, na mga ino na nato nga na ay mga intellectual disability. So for me personally, na ako ingon ani nga lolo kay what you call this, menopausal baby siya, and then dili na ako siya mapareha. Iyang edad 70 plus, pero ang iyang pansabot na pa siya sa 48 ingon ana, di pa gyud siya kalitok. So mo na siya no. This is very interesting and I am very happy nga ako ani siya na report karon kay my lola just passed away last 2 years, 1 year. So
For the next part is teaching needs range from. So for this slide, we have to provide a simple explanation about medical procedure, especially to the family of the patient, and complex assessment or health promotion about the intellectual disability, because the some of people are they are stereotyping that they are so-called dumb people, but they are not. So person with intellectual disability have the same needs for love, companionship, sexual gratification as other people. Sex education is often overlooked. So even though they have a late adaptation of learning, they are just like us, but late lang ang ilahang adoption. So they should also be educated.
When planning a teaching intervention, the nurse must mind the intellectual stage of the person, not his or her age. Individual to individual assessment is critical. Note verbal cues, gesture, signing, and symbols for communication purposes. Most people with intellectual disability are incapable of abstract thinking. Lunch, an example for that is, lunch will be here in a few minutes. Nurse could show the clock and point the time. This way, adults and children will benefit from short and clear explanation and demonstration. Communicating with patients, nurses must remember facial expression, voice tone, and talk to the family with regards to the patient's unique ways of communicating. Praise patients' positive behaviors. Avoid dominating teaching lessons and let the patient actively participate and gain sense of accomplishment. Nurses and caregivers must give only one direction at a time. A reward system for children by giving stickers with childhood character that will remind them of a job and reward that are important to that individual will work as well. So this is the familiar character childhood. An example for that is of SpongeBob, Peppa Pig, so Winnie the Pooh, Pikachu, and Mickey Mouse. So this character will help them to identify that they're doing good or a great job. So this is unequal representation among the population of IQ classification. So 130 to 144 is gifted or advanced, or very advanced, or 120 to 129 is superior, 110 or 119 is high average, while 90 to 109 is average.
I'm JC Manuel Cilio Pardas. Now let's proceed to our next topic, Asperger syndrome, Asperger's profile, and autism spectrum disorder. Now some of us might know that autism is a developmental disease that impairs a person's capacity to speak and socialize. Asperger syndrome is part of the autism spectrum, although it differs that people with Asperger's frequently have normal to higher IQ.
Autism is a development disorder that affects an individual's ability to socialize and communicate. Asperger's syndrome is part of the autism spectrum, but it differs because usually individuals diagnosed with Asperger's have normal to higher IQs. Overall, though, both have many overlapping similarities, and it is still being debated today as to whether or not the two terms need to exist as separate diagnoses. Our mission is to break down stigmas, myths, and misconceptions associated with autism. Many of our viewers have expressed concerns about the misunderstandings that surround this disorder, so we want to provide support to them and raise awareness. Here are 5 facts you need to know about autism. 1. Symptoms and signs of autism. Before we begin with this point, we want you to know that it's never a good idea to self-diagnose. Please visit a health professional in order to receive reliable insights. According to Autism Speaks, more than 2 million people have autism spectrum disorder, and 1 in 59 of those people are children. Statistics also show that autism affects more boys than girls. The signs that health professionals look for in patients include social challenges, communication difficulties, and repetitive behavior. Children with autism have trouble responding to social cues, such as returning a wave to someone or being responsive when someone calls their name. They also have higher disinterest in people starting at a young age, experience a delay in learning speech, and have trouble reading body language. For instance, if someone is mad and crosses their arms or expresses impatience by tapping their foot, people with autism can't pick up on that right away. They also tend to follow strict, rigid schedules and struggle with change. People with autism have few, specific interests that they are intensely devoted to. 2. Causes of autism. Researchers have discovered that there are many factors that influence the development of autism. One of them involves a specific gene that causes it. Other factors that are non-genetic related involve environmental risks and events that happen before or during pregnancy. For instance, a baby may be susceptible to developing autism if the mother breathed in high levels of air pollution while she was pregnant, or when the baby experiences a lack of oxygen in their brain. But none are certain, and scientists are still searching for a definitive cause. Ultimately, however, most adults with autism are less concerned with finding a cause than they are with being accepted and better understood by society. 3. Treatment options. Unlike many disorders, there is no medication that can specifically treat autism. Many people with autism use cognitive behavioral therapy in order to regulate their emotions and to work on their impulse control. There are also support groups they can join, speech therapists they can work with, and training sessions they can attend to build their social and motor skills. Related symptoms people with autism may experience, such as anxiety, depression, and ADD, can also be treated with the proper dosage prescribed by a health professional. 4. What teachers can do. Educating children with autism can be highly challenging, but here are some helpful tips they can use. When creating lesson plans, learn about what your students with autism like. People with autism have very distinct interests, so if you can incorporate them to make your lessons interesting, this can help them engage with the material more. Another way is to allow for group discussions. Classroom discussions may be intimidating for students with autism, but one-on-one interactions is more approachable for them. It's also important to provide structure and a schedule for them to follow. Predictability is crucial. 5. What parents can do. It's important for parents to remember that when their child has autism, they may have a hard time fitting in school or relating to other children. Be mindful of their habits and teach them to love themselves for who they are. Provide a safe structure for them to thrive in, and attend programs where you can stay educated on autism, and enroll your child in classes where they can work on their skills. Recognize that it will be a challenging journey ahead, but with your love and support, it can go a long way towards the progress they make. Do you struggle with autism or know someone who does? Please share your thoughts with us below. We also provided some helpful sources you can check out in our description box. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel as well for more helpful tips, and share this video with others. With your help, we can reach more people to spread awareness on mental health issues. Thanks for watching!
Based on what we can infer from the video, autism is a spectrum condition. All autistic people share certain difficulties, but being autistic will affect them in different ways. Some people with Asperger syndrome also have mental health issues or other conditions, meaning people need different levels and types of support. Again, Asperger syndrome is a form of autism, which is a lifelong disability that affects how a person makes sense of the world, processes information, and relates to other people. Autism is often described as a spectrum because the condition affects people in many different ways, and to varying degrees. People with Asperger syndrome see, hear, and feel the world differently to other people. People with Asperger syndrome don't have the learning disabilities uh, that many autistic people have, but they may have specific learning difficulties. They may have fewer problems with speech, but may still have difficulties with understanding and processing language. Asperger's is considered as a high-functioning form of autism. Asperger syndrome, according to National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke 2017, is a pervasive developmental disability that falls at the high end of the autism spectrum and is characterized by impaired communication, impaired social interaction, and repetitive or restrictive patterns of thought and behavior. The diagnostic category of pervasive developmental disorders, or PDD, refers to a group of disorders characterized by delays in the development of socialization and communication skills. Parents may note symptoms as early as infancy, although the typical age of onset is before 3 years of age. The DSM-5, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, which is authored by the American Psychiatric Association, redefined autism. Its predecessor, the DSM 4th edition text revision, included 5 pervasive developmental disorders. The autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, Rett's disorder, childhood disintegrative disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, or PDD and OS. The statistics surrounding Asperger's syndrome are uncertain, as many individuals, particularly adults, remain undiagnosed. The truth is, many people who are on the autism spectrum do not have such easily noticeable symptoms and often go undiagnosed, specifically those who are high functioning. And it's also important to note that you can't diagnose anything by taking a quiz on the internet. However, you can watch educational videos and maybe help with um, help with the diagnosis.
So, 1 in 54 are affected. So, Asperger syndrome is a brain dysfunction that is caused by a combination of genetics and environmental factors. So, the exact genetic abnormality has yet to be identified. So, the title and classification of Asperger syndrome has been the subject of some controversy and change. So, according to CDC 2020, it is estimated that 1 in 54 children are affected. So, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention of reported that 1 in 54 children had a diagnosis of ASD by the age of 8. So an early 10% increase over 2018, with the estimate was 1 in 59. So it is important to note pod na kanina data or kanina report pod kay gina-based nam or na based within the United States tanan. So according to Hosseini and Molia of 2021, Asperger syndrome is a brain dysfunction that is caused by a combination of genetics and environmental factors. So, the cause of Asperger syndrome, like most ASDs, is not fully understood, but there is a strong genetic basis. So, which means it does tend to run in families. So,
multiple environmental factors are also in the development of all ASDs, so, or exposure of children and pregnant women to known the neurotoxicants. So therefore, to get the most current information, people with specific questions about the genetic risk to themselves or for the members are encouraged to speak with they were encouraged to speak with a genetic counselor or other genetic professional. So December 2012, the American Psychiatric Association eliminated Asperger syndrome as a distinct diagnosis in the DSM-5. So instead, in the DSM-5, the condition falls under the umbrella term autism spectrum disorder. So, the exact genetic abnormality has yet to be identified. So, in recent years, the title and classification of Asperger syndrome has been the subject of some controversy and change. So, the American Psychiatric Association voted in December 2012 to eliminate Asperger syndrome as a distinct diagnosis in the DSM-5. So instead, in the DSM-5, the condition falls under the umbrella term autism spectrum disorder, or it was in the research of about the Autism Institute 2013 Brennan. So the decision was a somewhat controversial, so particularly among the Asperger syndrome community. So, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, Asperger syndrome was um, introduced with the to the world by British psychiatrist, which is the Lorna Wing. So in the 1980s, so the term derives from a 1944 study by Austrian. So the pediatrician Hans Asperger. So who observed autism-like behaviors and difficulties with social and communication skills in boys who had normal um, intelligence and language, what we call development, so that the Asperger's disorder was added to the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So, in 1994, as a separate disorder from autism. So, however, there are still many professionals who consider the Asperger's disorder less severe form of autism. So, in 2013, the DSM-5 replaced autistic disorder. So, Asperger disorder and other pervasive developmental disorders with the umbrella diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So, that's all.
Moving on, although the actual diagnostic label has changed, it is likely that the term Asperger syndrome will continue to be used for some time. Also, advocates within the autism community suggest that referring to disability as a syndrome implies that it is a pathology. As such, it fails to acknowledge the many positive abilities, talents, and potentials of people with Asperger syndrome. As a result, there is a movement to change the title to Asperger profile, which is viewed as a more positive and accurate term. Today, Asperger syndrome is technically no longer a diagnosis on its own. It is now part of a broader category called Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD. This group of related disorders shares some symptoms. Often people feel that Asperger syndrome is a fundament, and often uh, people feel that Asperger syndrome is a fundamental aspect of their identity. Even so, lots of people still use the term Asperger's. Children with Asperger syndrome, in addition to having impaired language, communication, and social interaction skills, exhibit distinguishing characteristics such as repetitive rituals, clumsiness, and obsessive interest in a single topic. In the language area, those with Asperger's often are extremely verbal, highly verbal, and their language can be very sophisticated at times. What they do when they're talking is that they tend to discuss themselves and their interest more and not focused on the interest of others. It can lead to a one-sided conversation. In their social interaction skills, for example, they have hard time reading gestures or facial expressions, and sometimes their gestures and facial expressions don't communicate what it is that they're thinking and feeling. In their repetitive rituals, individuals with Asperger syndrome will struggle often with routines or changes in routines. They have difficulties in transition periods, moving from one activity to another. Those with the Asperger's tend to focus on, or many have particular interest in unusual objects or topics. They focus on those kinds of peculiarities and they run with them, and that they become quite expert at them, that they exhibit often awkward body language. According to Medical News Today 2015, those with those with Asperger's, although they have good cognitive skills with average or above average vocabularies, these children may have difficulty modulating the pitch of their voice and speak in a flat, monotone manner. The ways that they use their voice, both the tone of their voice, the pitch of their voice, when they're speaking, and the way that they modulate the volume of their voice, can be problematic. But as mentioned before, those with Asperger's tend to be very sophisticated in terms of the language that they use, the vocabulary, and the language. Asperger's syndrome cannot be cured, but with treatment, many children with this condition can learn to grow into functioning adults. However, adults with Asperger's syndrome may continue to display subtle symptoms of the disorder, particularly in relation to social interactions. If you have Asperger's syndrome, you have it for life. It is not an illness or disease and cannot be cured. With the right sort of support, all autistic people can be helped out to live a more fulfilling life of their own choosing.
These are the symptoms of Asperger syndrome: social awkwardness, challenges making or keeping friends, avoidance of eye contact, difficulty with change, difficulty to understanding jokes or sarcasm, sensory issues, lack of adherence to social rules, very strong and particular interest, strong ability to focus. Um, that symptoms kat na ako'y kauban nga naa siya'y anak nga Asperger syndrome pod. Tapos nag-ask ko sa iyaha about ana nga mga symptoms og mao jud daw na ang symptoms sa iyahang nga nanglabas sa iyahang sa iyahang anak, like social awkwardness, dili kay siya kuan sa kanang daghay tao or kanang manglakaw sila, dili gusto lang niya masolo, challenges making or keeping friends, tas dili kayo siya pag natay one time gidala niya magkanang istoryahon na mo siya, dili kayo siya nagatan-aw sa amo habang nagastorya mi, naga-eye to eye contact, difficulty with changes, kanang gina pag naay mga pagbabago, gina-explain yun nila og tarong, tapos gina-guide gyapon daw nila. Tapos difficulty understanding joke or sarcasm kay naay uban ay dili kay uban sa kani nga sakit sa ilahad para sa ato is joke na siya, pero basin para pag-abot sa ilahad lahi na nga meaning. Sensory issue, lack of adherence to social rules, very strong and particular interest, strong ability to focus. Mao na siya jud daw kasagaran ang imuhang makita nga symptoms sa Asperger. Next is teaching individuals with Asperger syndrome. Provide multiple cues and a lot of repetition. Avoid using facial expressions, body languages, or changes in the tone or volume of speech. Kay ang kanang naay Asperger syndrome, lisod para sa ilaha ang magsabot or kanang feeling nila nga para sa imuha is normal lang na siya nga inistoryahan, normal lang na siya nga kanang makikistorya ka or mag-explain, pero sa ilaha is naana na siya meaning or naana siya pasabot mo na kanang dili pag magstorya ka kay dili nimo kung ano na imo ang di ba na uban change ta og facial expression, tapos body language tato nya usahay kay murag na ato ang tono ma-excite ta, tapos para sa ilaha kay kanang lahi na dili pa dapat ma-excite na part mga anak good. So mo nang kanang kuanan jud ang ato ang kanang pagig-istorya sa ilaha labi na sa atong volume of speech. Be direct, avoid vague or ambiguous expressions, and stick to relevant topics. Pag naamoy topic or pag naamoy istoryando or naa siya pangutana, dili nimo siya iwala sa iyahang pangutana or sa inyong topic. Dili nimo siya dili ka maghatag og kanang malabo nga expressions para sa iyaha. Dito lang ka direct lang ka sa inyong topic or sa iyang pangutana. Teach skills in context. Ask directive questions rather than open-ended questions requiring a lengthy response. Kanang mangutana ka sa iyaha nga dapat naapod siya kasunod nga tubag niya, dili kay mangutana ka nga kanang i-end lang po niya nga tapos wala na isunod, para naapod may convo each other. Provide a non-stimulating environment that is both quiet and familiar to the patient. Next is, it is important that the nurse talk about the child's plan with the family to implement strategies that have proved effective. Sa slide nato sa page 21 and 22 kanang symptoms of Asperger syndrome. Those slides are stated in the book. The following is a list of symptoms that can be observed in an individual, but i-explain gihapon nato siya sa parents, of course, or sa relatives or kung kinsa man ang guardian sa ato ang patient, para na kailangan gihapon nila kailangan gyapon sila magpa-check up or i-refer nato sila para sa doctor nga dapat ana nga sakit, mag-visit sila sa neurodevelopmental neurodevelopment para i-test siya, physical test pa na, tapos after ana ang neuro na ang mag-diagnose sa patient para ay kung unsa nga what kind of intellectual disability ang pasyente. So, dapat maski nakitaan nato siya og ing-ana nga mga symptoms, dili ta dayon mo ingon sa parents nga uy ko anang imuhang pasyente or ang imuhang anak or unsa ba ato ang istoryahan ang parents or guardian or relatives or kinsa man ang kanang naaderaa sa para sa patient na dapat sila mo visit sa neurodevelopment para siya i-physical test at diagnose kung unsa gyud ang intellectual disability sa pasyente. So that's our last topic of our report. Thank you for listening and have a good day.